Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes and this is the MMORPG Championships 2019. We'll be taking the world's most popular MMORPGs and making them fight to the death to find out which one deserves the title of Greatest MMORPG 2019. They'll compete on everything from graphics to gameplay, dungeons to developers. 16 contestants, 15 matches and one overall winner. Who will be the greatest MMORPG 2019? Match 2. Guild Wars 2 versus Runes of Magic. The 2019 championships continue with a household name, a member of the Big Five and global powerhouse Guild Wars 2, taking on the smaller German-based Runes of Magic. Despite a huge variation in player base size, maybe the Runes of Magic underdog has a fighting chance. Let's get to know the contestants. Guild Wars 2 carries the torch of the immensely successful Guild Wars 1, a game that shook the MMORPG world with its pay once, play forever business model. Guild Wars 2 continues the same way, with players buying the game once and then being able to play forever. No subscriptions, and now they've gone one step further and made the base game entirely free. The story does contain links to Guild Wars 1, but new players won't find any trouble starting here. Guild Wars 2 is often considered the most casual player-friendly MMO, as progression is horizontal, not vertical, meaning once you've got the best items and armor, you'll search for aesthetic overrides, not improvements. A giant world, brilliant music score, and A-list voice acting, including Nolan North, all combined to make Guild Wars 2 an immensely artistic and successful game. Runes of Magic is a smaller MMORPG produced by Runewalker Entertainment and then published originally by Frogster and now by Gameforge, the same company behind Terra. Many of you have probably never heard of Runes of Magic before now, which is why you may be surprised to know it won Best International PC Game in both 2009 and 2010 in the German Game Developer Awards, and received 9 massively Reader and Editor's Choice Awards. Released in 2009, it's received 5 major expansions and came to Steam in 2018, giving it a much needed boost of players. Similar to World of Warcraft in both looks and gameplay, with some unique twists. Each player character can have 3 classes, and by combining these classes in various configurations, you can build something totally your own. Round 1. Graphics and Style. Guild Wars 2 commits to a graphic style from the launcher before you even start the game, boldly showing a watercolor painting style streak of color. All in-game art and loading screens feature beautiful images in the same striking style, and any in-game overlays or on-screen messages are all accompanied with a vivid streak of colourful paint. Character customization is mind-bogglingly huge, with every item having special dye slots and a vast colour wheel. There are literally trillions of clothing combinations. The game varies from realistic human proportions to scientific futuristic electric cities, active volcanoes, lush jungles, and every fantasy trope in between. It's beautiful, there's no mistaking this. Guild Wars 2 is an extremely good looking game. However, the human starting area, a very popular area, does look like every other quaint village we've seen before. Forests and rivers are exactly as you'd expect, and coming from a game that has so much potential, seeing the mundane as the very first thing does generate a slow visual start. Runes of Magic sticks firmly to the classic MMORPG fantasy looks. It lands on the graphical slider between EverQuest and World of Warcraft. Higher quality and more detailed than EverQuest, but not quite as blocky or chunky as World of Warcraft. Everything is easy to understand, bright and colourful. It's a game that's fully aware it's a game. All enemies with names above their heads vividly displayed, grass textures just a little too green, and a stiff running animation all serve to remind you you're playing a game. It's not a bad art style. It suits it well and is extremely enjoyable to play around in, but it does place it firmly in the late 2000s and leave very little room for advancement. And the winner of the graphics and style round is Guild Wars 2. Choosing a watercolour effect as an overall design choice was a bold move, but it paid off. It's helped Guild Wars 2 develop a unique and striking artistic style, and I hope to see much more of it in the future. Round 2. The levelling process. Guild Wars 2 features level scaling in many areas of the game, so out-leveling an area is never a problem. You'll also gain experience for basically everything: killing enemies, discovering new locations, even harvesting crafting materials. Everything slowly fills that experience bar. A nice quest feature is, you don't actually have to accept a quest to complete it. Simply be in the area and complete the quest requirement and you'll gain the reward. Guild Wars 2 has two major strengths. Event chains allow a player to follow a short, self-contained story across a map as various things happen, and you'll gain large amounts of experience for doing it. And once a character is at maximum level, you'll gain the items and armor you need quickly. Then it's all skill based. The weak aspect of leveling, a second or third character, can seem dull. Completing maps you've already completed or helping citizens you've already helped can only be entertaining so many times, but this is a small complaint within an otherwise very fair system. Runes of Magic is rooted in the traditional, repeatable, or storyline quests, exclamation marks above NPCs' heads, notice boards in towns telling you to kill X amount of whatever, and while it's practically a cliche that I was killing boars in a forest, it was still a good experience. Runes of Magic doesn't take any great risks with the leveling process, it sticks to what it knows, and despite this, it's undeniably fun. Maybe it's a mix of simplicity and relaxation, combined with just enough challenge to make sure I never became bored, but running through early game and collecting items or killing mobs was oddly enjoyable. However, cracks begin to appear at level 50 and up. The experience required increases suddenly and dramatically. Dying forces you to incur an experience point debt, and paying that off takes time. It's obvious this was done to push items in the cash shop. And the worst part of this game is, the post-50 grind makes it almost impossible to push multiple toons up into the end game, especially as you level each class on a toon separately. And the winner of the leveling process is Guild Wars 2. Runes of Magic early game is a hugely enjoyable experience, but the late game grind taints it. Guild Wars 2 remains enjoyable and fair throughout. Round 3. Story and Lore. Guild Wars 2 builds on the already impressive backlog of lore from Guild Wars 1, with nostalgic callbacks to both people and places. Guild Wars 1 still holds a record with the sheer size of the Nightfall expansion, boasting a world size of 15,000 square miles. There's more than enough in-game NPC stories to last for years. Out of the game, there are 3 official novels: Edge of Destiny, Ghosts of Ascalon, and Sea of Sorrows. And when the game was first announced, it was revealed to the hauntingly beautiful song Fear Not This Night, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. The game itself is set several hundred years after the events of Guild Wars 1, so cities and similar locations still exist. The game also includes elements of the living story, a methodical approach to storytelling that adds in content to the game slowly, allowing players to play it at a more relaxed pace. 2 major expansions, Path of Fire and Heart of Thorns, have also been added, which brought epic individual stories each time. Runes of Magic follows a rather interesting and somewhat meta narrative story. The world of Taboria was created when the all-powerful Avenias began recording their idea for reality in a book, and the world was perfect. However, this created a boring book, so they began to write in terrible evils and heroes trying to stop them. And in the game, that's your role, to rewrite the story the way you see fit. The game never reached the critical or universal appeal needed to release books or supplemental materials, but that's not to say each expansion hasn't contained deep and detailed lore. Each NPC has some flavour dialogue, and each place in-game has some visual or historical monument that may have no in-game significance, but simply exists to make the world feel more lived in. Runes of Magic can, however, sometimes feel like a my first fantasy world, hitting all the tropes of humans being smart, elves being beautiful, and ghosts being evil. Parts of the game, despite being deep, feel shallow because of the paint-by-numbers approach of filling in the history. If your deep lore is not new or interesting, it's not going to feel deep. And the winner of story and lore is Guild Wars 2. 3 novels, a gorgeous song, and the award-winning first game simply provide too much content to take on. And while Runes of Magic does have its moments of brilliance, they're often overshadowed by the predictable path it takes. Round 4. Combat Mechanics. Guild Wars 2 has ploughed ahead in this competition with a strong start, but might lose some steam here, as while exploration and general gameplay are strengths, the combat system is a weaker link. Guild Wars 2 has a limited hotbar, with your 5 main attacks linked to your weapon. If dual wielding, your first 3 are based off your main hand and final 2 from your offhand. This can lead to a situation where your best combination of attacks is only available if you equip a weapon you're not a fan of. Not many wizards imagine they'll end up most effective with a huge two-handed sword, but that's often the case. The next few hotbar spaces have more flexibility, mixing defensive, healing, or ultimate powers. Hundreds of variations exist, but some abilities are so situational you'll almost never use them. Combat has often been described as floaty, and after several hundred hours in the game, I have to agree, it's the loosest part of an otherwise tight and well-made game. Hits have no weight behind them, and huge battles often feel like Zerg rushes. I know I'm probably helping, but I have no idea how, and nothing is giving me much feedback of how useful I actually am. The various classes do bring a breath of fresh air to combat, such as the engineer building turrets or the elementalist cycling through 4 elements and each element having independent cooldowns. And including the option to switch from tab targeting to action combat is a genius idea and worthy of high praise. But none of this really saves Guild Wars 2 from the feeling that combat doesn't quite live up to the high polish of the rest of the game. Runes of Magic, however, takes its game design straight from classic World of Warcraft, and it does it well. It's tab targeting, multiple hotbars, and no global cooldown. Combat follows the Holy Trinity and doesn't innovate too much, except with the multi-class system. Every toon in Runes of Magic has a base class, a secondary class, and a final third tertiary class, and combining these in any order of 1, 2, and 3 gives you different results. A mage knight is different to a knight mage. This means you and your friends can swap your builds and classes before a fight to really dominate it. There's a reason Runes of Magic copied Warcraft. It works, and it works well. Early game can be boring and methodical, but once you're teaming up with other players and taking on harder bosses, you realise why this combat became the standard. It's so much fun, with so many choices and moment-to-moment reactions to focus on. The downside is, it's so heavily built into this style, it will never be able to change. But it doesn't need to. It's already using a great system. The winner of the Combat Mechanics round is Runes of Magic. Guild Wars 2 sets such a high benchmark for itself that it's obvious the combat falls below it. While Runes of Magic doesn't do many things well, combat is an absolute blast. Round 5. Dungeons and Raids. Guild Wars 2 does have dungeons, but you'll probably hear them called by other names, and the sheer variation can be confusing. Regular story dungeons are part of the story quests. Then when you've completed one, you'll unlock exploration mode. It's the same dungeon, but with 3 or 4 different paths leading to different bosses. You choose which path to take at the start, so one dungeon is actually 3 or 4 different smaller dungeons. This adds a huge level of replayability to the game. Once you've hit the level cap and found some better equipment, you'll want to focus on fractals instead. A fractal is a smaller challenge within the Fractal of the Mists, and acts similar to a dungeon. You can adjust the difficulty level of a fractal from 1 to 100. Fractals are the main endgame PvE activities, although many players choose not to be involved with them at all, focusing on exploring, crafting, jumping puzzles, or achievements. Guild Wars 2 does have what we could consider a raiding scene, but it's not as hardcore as some of the other MMORPGs in this competition, and when people discuss endgame PvE, Guild Wars 2 isn't a world-leading example. Not bad by any means, but not the best. Runes of Magic knows its formula and sticks to it. With dungeons opening up around level 15 and the best equipment and weapons hidden within, it does, however, add a little twist that I personally love. You can enter any dungeon anywhere at any level, but you have to travel to the entrance. You can team up with any player of any other level and adventure together. High-level friends can drag you through tough content, or low-level groups can attempt something far above their level. It creates this fun, player-driven desire to defeat something not for the reward, but for the sheer pride of knowing you managed to do it. Runes of Magic spreads the dungeons out too. The starting area actually contains one of the hardest dungeons in the game, and areas halfway through the game have hidden alcoves housing massive underground labyrinths filled with interesting mechanics and traps. While Guild Wars 2 presents its dungeons and fractals as smaller challenges within the game and allows you to teleport to them from anywhere, Runes of Magic places them into the game as hidden and rewarding challenges willing to take on all parties, any size or level, and reward you if completed. It's much more of an old school method of thinking and brings with it a much greater sense of pride when you discover and then master a dungeon. This round is extremely close, and while Guild Wars 2 is a great game, its combat mechanics let down the dungeons and fractals. And Runes of Magic has great player versus enemy scenarios, but many are so demanding you'll never find a party big enough to complete them. After some debate, the Dungeons and Raids category ends in a draw. Guild Wars 2 does have variety and challenge, but Runes of Magic has the classic fantasy edge, with some dungeons taking hours for an experienced team. Both games appeal equally to a different demographic and results in a tie. Round 6. Player versus player. Guild Wars 2 may take a lot of flack for its subpar combat system, and you'd think it would create a weak PvP scene, but you'd be wrong. The developers know the moment-to-moment combat isn't the highlight, so they make sure absolutely everything else is done right. When joining a PvP game, you're leveled up to maximum, given PvP only maximum equipment, and allowed to redesign your build as often as you like, giving you complete freedom to mix and match all available skills. The PvP maps are well designed and fun. No one class dominates, and it's a team composition that will secure you any victory. Working together is vital, and because everyone is on the same level item-wise, it's all down to individual skill. Runes of Magic may have the edge when it comes to PvE, but PvP is a different story. You can duel anyone anywhere by simply selecting duel and having that player accept. However, as the game contains several pay-to-win elements such as upgrading your equipment or removing useful attributes from one item and placing them into another, you'll always end up with the richest players wiping the floor with everyone else. It's the type of game where you're glad to have that wallet warrior on your side when the boss monster shows up, because in PvP, there's no way you'd ever even be able to scratch them if they were attacking you. The winner of the player versus player round is Guild Wars 2. The choice to place everyone onto a level playing field and make skill and tactics the deciding factor is a brilliant one. No unfair equipment, no pay to win. Round 7. Unique elements. Our final quickfire round serves to praise any unique things each game does and condemn any poor decisions it's made. Guild Wars 2 Pro. Base game is now free to play. Horizontal progression means no gear treadmill to tire you out. Jumping puzzles are some of the most fun I've ever had in an MMORPG. Insane customizations. Con. The casual friendly nature means you're not often in much danger. Human starting area needs work. And floaty combat. Runes of Magic. Pro. Nostalgic style. Variety in the class system. The enemy card system, where each enemy can drop a Pokemon style card of themselves, adding a fun card hunting element to each kill. And some of the best music in any MMORPG ever. Seriously, I'll leave a link in the description. Con. It's beginning to look dated. It's extremely pay to win at the end game and has a remarkably low player base. Taking into account all the rounds and each unique factor each of these two games bring, the winner in Guild Wars 2 vs Runes of Magic is Guild Wars 2. For those of you who've played both, this won't be too shocking a result. While Runes of Magic does bring some quality ideas to the table and provide a highly enjoyable early game experience, the late game and its slavish obedience to an old formula ultimately means it must bow down to the future. Guild Wars 2 is a super strong game with excellent exploration, vibrant artistic style, and a remarkably fair payment model. It's one of the strongest currently available and will advance to the next match. Thank you very much for watching. Who do you think deserved the victory? Leave a thumbs up if you agree with Guild Wars 2 and a thumbs down if you're in support of Runes of Magic. If you've enjoyed this video, you can come chat to me live on Twitch over at twitch.tv/Josh Strife Hayes. Join the Discord chat, link in the description below, or you could be a lovely person by subscribing and ringing the little bell icon to be notified when the next match happens. Thank you very much for your time and have a great night.